hyperobjects is guilty of jargon. I will not deny this. So I'm just going to get into it and explain these two main words, hyperobject and hyperreality, and hope it goes well. So one of the main reasons Timothy Moran came up with the idea of hyperobjects is to try to explain what climate change is ontologically. So climate change is like, it's hard to like figure out like what it is. So he defined it as a hyperobject. And hyperobjects are objects so distributed in space and time that they defy what we normally think about objects. And they have some defining characteristics, 3 out of 5 of which I'll get into because I have time limit. Okay, so interobjective. Hyperobjects are interobjective in the sense that they are encompassed in other objects. So like something like climate change is not the rain, and it's not the heat, it is not the temperature, but it is encompassed in all these different objects. So it's like, same thing with the internet. It's encompassed in your phone, it's encompassed in the TV, and the Wi-Fi signals, I guess theoretically, they're encompassed in certain things. And they have certain like features like that. Also, they are phased, as in they're sliced throughout time. So you cannot understand climate change as something in one moment in time. Climate change is not just happening right now. If you slice this one present moment, that's not climate change. It happens over a certain period of time. So it's on a certain continuum or spectrum that can better be understood throughout a graph as opposed to some sort of like, I don't know, this chair is a chair right now, but it's a chair yesterday, but you don't need the whole time period for it to be a chair. Whereas hyperobjects need the whole time period for it to be consistently thought of as what it is. It cannot be thought of as otherwise. Third characteristic is they're non-local, as if they do not exist in one locality. It's very simple, I feel like. So like climate change is not just here, the internet is not just here. They're in all sorts of places. They're massively distributed throughout certain places in time. So yeah, that's the first part. Hyperreality. Oh, fun fact, Timothy Moran loves Bjork. They have like very fun email correspondence you can like read online, and she's like a really big fan of his and his like social ecological theories. And like he named hyperobjects after the song Hyper Ballad. So yeah. Hyperreality. So the Matrix, you're all very familiar with it. They read Simulation Simulacra, and they did not understand it, and the Wachowski sisters and it's not at all related. They make the word simulation seem silly. So I'm gonna try to make simulation seem like a real theoretical term again. Please bear with me. So a simulation is one instance of the hyperreal. So I'm gonna talk about objects, subjects, and like reality representation for a single second. So you see something, and then you have a representation of that thing in your mind. You see a chair, you imagine a chair, very simple. But there's hyperreal exceeds representation itself. So the example I like to go to that I think is very fun is like an Instagram filter. It makes you look more real somehow, but like it gets rid of like most of your features. It's the hyperreal element. So it's like, it has to exceed the real itself. I know that sounds a little bit absurd, but I'm trying to think of other examples. The show, like Planet Earth, like things on Planet Earth or like any sort of like nature show look more real than they actually are. They put these filters over it. There's a certain element in which TV shows are like more real. No one stutters, like there's no awkward moments. They like simulate the perfect reality in such a sense that it replaces reality itself. So hyperreality is something that is specific to like technological and postmodern societies. Think about technology in the vague sense, as in like chairs, houses, everything is technology. Fences are technology in some sense, they serve a certain task. So don't just think about like objects. So like when you think about hyperreality, don't just think about like screens. Like the hyperreal exists like when you're talking to two people on your own, because there's a certain way it's pervaded throughout reality. It blends like truth and fiction. I think one example is people like love to talk about now is why Baudrillard is so popular is fake news. So like one event happens, and you can like news is like a simulation of news in the sense that it's never just like something random. It's not like you read an article about like a gorilla and a lizard. Like it's always like something that has some basis in reality. It's a blend of fact and fiction. It's something that like sort of has some sort of like essence to it that people want to believe, and in some way has a truth instinct, but it's not necessarily true itself. So yeah, I think that like to explain like post-structuralism in like a simple sense, it's like meta-narratives are kind of important, because like think about the different worlds everyone lives in now. Like people like can have radically different beliefs, like just living right next to each other. That's like a symptom of like a hyper-real like post-structure society in which like one event can happen and people leave with 1,000 interpretations of that event. Like a terrorist attack will happen, and like the left wing and the right wing, the centrists, and everyone will find like what they want from it, and they'll like use that to further their own belief system. So everyone always ends up with what they want from like the hyper-real. So now that you understand these two terms, hopefully. So the two things I think these theories offer each other is they both like are attempting to understand like why global catastrophe is the way it is. Why are we sitting here, doing this when the world's currently in the process of ending? Why is that so casual? Why is that a fun thing? Why are we doing this? It seems really silly to me. But so both of these theorists consider themselves theorists of the end of the world. So it's that when Baudrillard, he says the real disappeared, he is not joking. It is not a metaphor. He thinks that at some point reality itself has vanished from us. That's a really big, bold claim. I mean, obviously there are like hierarchies of it. You'll consider like America the most hyper-real. If you like live in like a village somewhere and don't have a cell phone, you probably don't live in the hyper-real as intensely, but it's probably still pervasive in some way or another. So we live in this desert in which the real has disappeared and we have nothing but like simulations of reality itself. And that applies like, he'll say jogging is a simulation of having to run. You don't need to do anything anymore, but you continue to like try to simulate what you should have to do naturally. It's a simulation of the natural world itself. There are all these things that like we work out instead of having a world in which like we use our bodies naturally, things of that nature. Morton does a way, he hates the concept of the world itself. So I'll explain this the best way I can. We tend to think of like the world as a piece of paper, and we write on that piece of paper, and that's what human beings do. We live on the piece of paper, and what we do is like written words on it. And the paper is like a neutral place where we just like put what is there, and that's what the world is. It's a place, like just a setting for which we live. But we do not, now what happens is, because of like technology and climate change, is that the world is changing because of our actions. That'll be the equivalent of like dipping a piece of paper like in a bunch of ink and then it just like falls apart. There is no longer a neutral ground for events to happen. There is no longer a world in which that like we just like live in. The world itself is our fault now. The weather, the rain, everything, the ocean, the tide, it's all consequences of our actions now. There is no longer a neutral world in which that we can pretend we only live in. There's only a world in which that's our fault. And they both make it very clear that the end of the world is not something that just happens once. We tend to have a vision of TV shows that there's one global catastrophe, whether it be zombies or like, the day after tomorrow, or like New York City's underwater in like 1 second. But the world tends to end very slowly. It ends one day at a time, and that's how it tends, and that's what's happening right now. It ends one day at a time. There will never be a day where like the world ends. It'll be 20 years later, and then suddenly you realize what happened. That's how it always goes. Okay, so both of them are theorists of objects. They both do so Baudrillard focuses on technological objects, Morton focuses on ecological objects. So what they tend to do is they flip the object-subject dichotomy. So when you think of subjects, you tend to think of the active agent in philosophy. It's the person that does things, The object, thing we pick up, I touch it. But what they both do is realize that objects are things that compel us to act certain ways. When you come into this room, you will not stand here awkwardly, you will sit in a chair, because chairs are there. When everywhere you go, and especially in New York City, you're compelled to do certain things based on the objects around you. So they both sort of say that the objects kind of like make you do. Like when I hold like a cup, you're kind of compelled to grab it like this. I don't go like this. There's all sorts of weird ways you can do a cup, but that's not what a cup is for. It's not what it does. You're compelled to use it in a certain way. Like that. Yeah. So you have to think of in the world, especially technology, as things that compel you to do certain things, to act in certain ways. And once you understand that, you realize there's a lack of agency there that's very concerning. So yeah, they break down the object-subject dichotomy and understanding simulated nature. Okay, cool. This is one way I think that they help each other. There's a lot of ways, because I just spent most of the thing just explaining the core parts of it. So this is one thing that I write about for a while. So shows like Planet Earth, they simulate nature. They're not nature itself, and they end up doing exactly the opposite of what they're meant to do. They're meant to make you care about the world, but instead they reproduce your separateness from it by making you think of it as out there, as nature itself, the world itself is something further from you. Moore wants you to get rid of that concept of world and nature itself. It wants you to sort of get abolish the world and nature from your mind, because this is nature. Like, this is natural. Just as a bird lives in a nest, we have these weird universities that, you know, we live in, we adapt to as our environment. And, you know, it's not to say that they are essential features of human existence, obviously, but they are not unnatural. So yeah, so things, simulated nature is a way I kind of combine Morton's theories and Baudrillard's theories to come up with, like, to explain the way that we reproduce a world that is separate from us. Why should you care? Sorry, I'm pretty dehydrated. So Morton and Baudrillard are both trying to explain why we sit here at conferences instead of doing things about the fact the world's ending. So they're both like, and they're offering conceptual solutions to this problem, because we can't just run on the same treadmill and you solve the same problems with the same thing we're doing now. If we could solve climate change, what we're doing now, we would have done it. We were going to require some radically different thought process and radically different solutions to the global catastrophes that are around us. So you can't solve poverty with capitalism, things of that nature. Baudrillard, it explains political events in the 21st century. I don't have to explain to you why we live in a terrible time, right? It explains the way that we interpret events, how people tend to manage to take away what they want to take away from. Like, we all live in this hyper-real environment which tends to serve us and only us. We live in hyper-individualized world, and somehow in a collective, which is absolutely crazy. But like, Google filters your Google searches to give you what you want to see. Like, it happens. Like, left-wing and right-wing people, if you Google something, they put a filter over it. You don't even realize. And I'm also combining making a theory of object-oriented ontology, but no one cares about that. That's it.